Hey there, my name is Austin Belzer, and I founded Austin B Media. Welcome to the Austin B Media podcast review of Bo Burnham's latest special, Inside. I first discovered Bo Burnham years ago. I can't remember when exactly. I forgot to write that down when I saw his most recent special at the time, when he released Make Happy. In that special, he discusses the divide between his stage persona and who he wants to be, how that is eating him alive mentally, as well as critiquing current sociological issues like white people complaining about life problems, modern music, love, and too many other things to list. At the conclusion of that special, he drops that persona and quit comedy for 5 years, during which he had a cameo in The Big Sick, directed 8th Grade, and co-starred in last year's Promising Young Woman. With Inside, Bo Burnham wrote, directed, filmed, and edited the special during the pandemic, and gives the most insight into his mental health, how it deteriorates when he's forced to perform, as well as socio-political conflicts around the world, how social media corrupts our perception of our inner happiness, and much more. I've watched the special 9 times now, and it gets better every time I watch it. Burnham has learned a lot from his time directing 8th Grade and other specials like Tambourine. Without giving too much away, this is much less of a comedy special and more of a half comedy special, half documentary. For much of Inside, Burnham speaks through various characters such as pseudo Sesame Street type guest, which coincidentally he'll be writing songs for the upcoming movie of. What I can only describe as a vampire putting on his charms to suck somebody's blood, and various R&B and pop stars. When Burnham uses these characters, Inside is more about channeling his feelings to talk about performativity and less about the characters on screen. Burnham clearly loves the ability to transform himself, even if that comes at the cost of his mental health. To give the audience room to breathe, Burnham uses footage to illustrate how oppressive the room he's recording in is to him mentally. The room that was just flooded with these crazy lighting effects is now naturally lit, with the aftermath of the previous segment's equipment littered all across the floor. Often we see Burnham surrounded by this equipment, frustrated at what he just recorded. In these tiny moments, Burnham shows the audience what he does to capture even 1 ounce of the audience's attention. At one point, we even see Burnham staring into a mirror, seemingly talking to the audience. But he isn't talking to the audience. He's talking to himself. In the absence of an audience, Burnham dominates the background of Inside. Burnham is right back to where he started pre-pandemic shutdown. He's inside of a tiny room with a keyboard and a camera. Fundamentally, popping onto Netflix and watching the special is a different experience for both parties. Burnham doesn't get the feedback he would from a live audience, and we don't experience the same adjustments we would if Burnham had done this as a recorded special and with a crew behind him. To compensate, Burnham adds laugh tracks to some of his songs, and much of his material is built around addressing the audience, asking them questions about the role of comedy in a world where comedy no longer makes sense. Burnham seems to have provided the answers. There will always be an audience for comedy, live or otherwise, as long as the audience wants it. At the same time, his attempts to conjure an audience out of thin air are nigh impossible. At the end of the day, Burnham is recording this alone in his guest house. So, Burnham shifts the narrative back onto himself, whose hair growth marks the passing of time no matter who he shapeshifts into during the performances. Sometimes this is literal, where he projects his performances onto his white t-shirt. Inside is all about the endless cycle of performance and consumption, worrying about the act of performativity and authenticity. Inside writings positions Burnham as the main character stuck in one room, using the small space to explore his anxieties about identity and art. It's about staying inside and being awed by how being inside makes you reflect on life, on art, on the internet, and not being sure when the door will open to the outside. It's an astonishing accomplishment, a testament to how gifted Burnham is at directing, writing, songwriting, and performing. If you want to watch Bo Burnham's Inside, his latest special, you can now watch that for basically free on Netflix. And I give Bo Burnham's Inside a 5 out of 5 stars for this masterclass of comedy special, or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's all I've got for you guys today. In the meantime, I want to thank a few people. I want to thank Thomas Stoneham Judge from moviesforreal.net. He's actually going to TIFF. I'm super jealous of him, but hey, as long as I get to read his stuff, I'm fine with it. Shane Kanto from the Wasteland Reviewer, he reviews way more than I do. I'm super jealous of him. Joseph Davis from Sif Pop, he writes a bunch there on sifpop.com. David Walters, a Twitter friend of mine, and a Bula, sorry if I mispronounced your name, for supporting me on Patreon. If you don't know what Patreon is, here's a crash course. Patreon, you basically support me at a certain tier a month. So think like a Netflix subscription. There's Netflix Standard, Netflix HD, Netflix 4K, and then there's Netflix DVD and Netflix Blu-ray and all that stuff. So at the $1 tier, which is very popular, you can get stuff like my weekly schedule, and among other things. I'm sure I'm missing out on a lot, like the 1 hour early access to anything I post, even if it's an embargoed thing. You get all these behind the scenes updates. You get practically, I would call it a backstage pass, if you will. But to follow the theme of my favorite movie, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, I believe that is the Matthew Patel tier. And then you've got the $5 tier, which is even more. There's so much to explain about that, but that's patreon.com/AustinBMedia. I'd super appreciate it if you would go there and support me, even if it's $1 a month, even if it's like no matter what, because I am $1.26 away from paying for my domain for the year. That's my first goal of many in this year-long fundraiser to help secure funds for year 2 of Austin B Media. I've already been so blessed by the people I previously mentioned who supported me. I just really appreciate anyone, if you're listening to this and liked that review, to go ahead and chip in. But if that ain't your style, I understand. austinb.media. You can go there, read all of it on time. It'll all still be there. No exclusive stuff there. But you can also subscribe to the newsletter, Austin B Updates, which I think not episode 7, but the 7th edition. I'm moving to a monthly newsletter on that front. So that will be out this Monday, I believe. So check that out. I'll have a link to that in the show notes below. Also, if you're listening to this and you want to hear more, I'd highly suggest subscribing to this on the podcast service of your choice. I know there's Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, so many casts. And also, if you're using Apple Podcasts, or if you have iTunes installed on your computer, whichever way, I'd really appreciate you rating and reviewing the show on iTunes, because apparently I've heard from a few dozen, 100 people that boosts the podcast up into the charts of iTunes. I don't really understand it either, okay? And you can also find some other interviews in that podcast feed. I'll have the link to the RSS feed below. And if you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Austin B Media. There's the Patreon, of course. I'm going to start doing TikToks at Austin B Media. Twitch at twitch.tv/AustinBStreams. Twitter, AustinBMedia_. And then on YouTube at AustinBMedia. And yeah, that's basically it for this week. So until next time, this is Austin Belzer signing off.